Cool. Welcome everyone. My name's Kim. I'm a client success manager here at Luminoso, and today I'm joined by Ptrathik. Ptrathik, welcome. Would you introduce yourself?
Yes, hello everybody. My name is Ptrathik. I'm the chief of staff over here at Luminoso, and I'm pleased to handle some of the marketing campaigns as well. So looking forward to the campaign. Looking forward to the webinar, Kim.
Thank you, and we're super glad to have you. Pratik's one of our newest members of the team, has an MBA, so perfect to host today's webinar with. So thank you for joining us. Today's webinar is about one of the most essential market research analyses, the SWOT analysis. And today we'll be going over how to understand the grid, different information and data sources, and ways to improve the accuracy and comprehensiveness of the SWOT analysis with each quadrant. And then we'll wrap it up with 3 sample SWOT analyses, one with scored data, one without scored data, and one really general one. So to get us started, as our MBA grad, Ptrathik, will you get us started? What is SWOT analysis?
Yeah, sure. So obviously S stands for strengths, W stands for weaknesses. These two are internal components of the framework. And then on the external side, we have O, which stands for opportunities, and T, which stands for threats. And now to describe these in detail, let me first touch upon the internal elements, starting off with strengths and weaknesses. So in the context of a SWOT analysis, strengths are the internal factors that give a particular business or an organization a competitive edge. These can include valuable assets, unique capabilities, a very strong brand recognition, efficient processes or workflows that have been curated, or just skilled and talented personnel. So by identifying and leveraging these strengths, a company can definitely capitalize on its advantages to differentiate itself and succeed in the market. And the other internal element in the SWOT analysis is that of W, which is weaknesses. And weaknesses refer to the internal limitations or areas where a company lags behind its competitors. So when I say competitors, it can be both direct and indirect competitors. Now, weaknesses can encompass factors such as outdated technology stacks, inadequate resources, very poor financial health, inefficient operations, or just lack of domain expertise. So obviously, recognizing weaknesses is crucial for businesses to address and improve upon them to enhance like performance and to minimize vulnerabilities. Now, moving on to the external elements, which I'm personally more excited about generally, is O stands for opportunities. These are external factors that represent favorable circumstances for a particular business. They can arise from emerging markets or different technologies that are currently advancing. For example, with the whole ChatGPT or conversational AI revolution that's happening these days, another set of opportunity-based trends can be changing consumer preferences, some amount of strategic partnerships that can arise due to the changes in the market. And also from a government perspective, there can be some supportive regulatory environments induced, and that can be an opportunity as well. But an organization needs to develop capability to identify and seize these opportunities that enables them to expand their market presence and launch new products, diversify their offerings, and to drive more growth and profitability. Now, coming to the last external element, which is the letter T, which stands for threats. Threats are external factors that pose challenges or risks to a business. These can be mild to medium to high level risks. These can stem up from very intense competition or economic volatility, extremely drastic market trends, extremely negative or resisting regulatory changes or disruptive technologies. You have incremental technologies and you have disruptive technologies. For example, if you take television, for example, back in the day before OTT platforms, you had like incremental innovations in televisions, which was all right, which was extremely good for TV companies. But when the whole OTT platform wave came up, that is disruptive. That is an extreme shift in how the markets actually play. So that can be a threat for one company, but it can also be an opportunity for another player in the market. So again, understanding and mitigating these threats is crucial for companies to proactively respond to market dynamics, protect their market share, and just ensure long-term sustainability. Yeah.
I love it. So I'll summarize real quick. Internal advantages, what are we doing well? Internal disadvantages, where are we not doing well that we need to improve? If we think of it internally like a body, like what are our big muscles and what are we, I'll admit to having a little bit T-Rex arm effect, right? Like what do we need to start working out more? External advantages, where are the opportunities for us to do better? Where can we claim space that is currently unclaimed? And external disadvantages, what do we need to start guarding ourselves against? What do we need to start loving against? What do we need to be proactive about? Proactive probably in all categories. And that's distilled down into this more recognizable table that most folks who've taken marketing classes may be familiar with, and now all of our viewers will be familiar with as well. So with all of our research objectives, or with all of our research, we start with objectives. So we've started with a few sample objectives to take you guys through so that you can compare what are your objectives and how are those different from questions, or maybe the exact questions that we would ask our stakeholders, because they're not perfectly synonymous, but they should be aligned. So objectives look like understanding market needs and the roles our clients play in the market. Ptrathik, you had some really good examples about these earlier. Do you want to chime in with some examples on how maybe we do this?
Yeah, sure. Do you want me to touch upon how Luminoso does it, or like probably from a general market perspective?
Let's go general and we can touch on Luminoso at the end.
Sure. So I think let's take the current market, for example. It's 2023, and what does the market need right now? The market requires automation, how to drive more processes in less amount of time, because you have, let's say if you take the technology market, for example, there's so much competition that's there right now, and customers need, in terms of customer needs, they require personalization, right? So in terms of the market, we as a company, we need to like sort of drive more personalization oriented features, as a generic stance. And with respect to what our clients' roles are there in the market, let's say you're a software company, and you are offering services to a broad range of clients. You'll need to understand the positioning of the different clients that you have as to what their role is in the market out there, right? So just to summarize, an example for understanding market needs might be driving more personalization in the lives of customers from a B2C perspective. And it's very important for any company to understand how their clients are placed in the market. Yeah.
Yeah, and that ties into, well, how can we and how do we meet those needs? So that's an internal reflection and an external projection. Internally is, what do we already do? What problem are we already solving? How well are we solving it? And to what extent could we solve more? And then how can we solve those needs is like, where do we need to be developing? Where do we need to be reaching out? Where do we need to be educating? There's a lot there. Anything you want to add to that, or should we jump over to taking inventory?
Yep, I think I completely echo with what you're saying with respect to the orange box of objective. But I would like to add another point around capability building, because internally speaking, if you have the capacity in terms of the right software or in terms of the right personnel, only then will we be able to identify a particular need from a market standpoint. And again, when we use the word market, it can mean either a customer, or it can mean a promoter, or it can mean a stakeholder in your supply chain, or it can also mean what the government needs right now or what the government wants right now, right? So I think if you have the right capacity, you can identify the market need, and that, again, like you said, caters to more internal side of things with respect to the framework we are discussing today.
Yeah, and that definitely ties into taking inventory of the org and the potential for innovation. There's a lot of things going on. Like you just listed a whole bunch of stakeholders that have opinions, have stories, have influence that will have consequential outcomes. And it's really good to not just silo yourself into a single data source, but tap into as many stakeholders as you can if you're going to take a complete inventory. Because only once you have a complete inventory with as much data as you can you really understand and have an advantage over the people who aren't going through this process. So that's huge. And then reflectively, again, understand our unique culture is super important. We talk to our employees. We'll cover that more in a minute. In the context of emerging trends, if you're working in HR, if you're working on recruitment, for example, you can't just understand what your companies are doing and be successful. You need to understand who else is recruiting your team, understand where your team is coming from. And that's the corporate HR use case. But in education, if you have a transfer student that's struggling to be successful in your school system, their experience isn't exclusively in their 1 or 2 years at that school, right? They came from somewhere else, maybe even another place before that. What were their experiences and what are they bringing in? And how do you need to evolve and adapt to meet your clientele and your stakeholders, regardless of where they are, where they're from, or what you're doing, right? We want to understand everything. So when we start with these objectives, that gives us a direction and a mindset to start asking the questions that will give us the answers, that will give us something meaningful. If we don't have these objectives in front of us, a lot of research may feel like just checking a box of, yes, we did our SWOT analysis. We know that we do this and don't do that, and this is bad. If we're stating the obvious and it's not data-based, the exercise is, I'm not gonna say it's a waste of time, but like kind of, right? Like we want to do the exercises that make a difference, right? We want our research to make a splash. We want to make meaningful change and make everything better. So let's start with how to improve your internal assessment, right? How do we start to understand our strengths and weaknesses? So I tend to start with, okay, well, who are our internal people, right? How do we identify what our internal strengths are? I tend to default to employee feedback, the employees who work with customers, the employees who understand the bugs in the system, the advantages, the untapped potential. Employees are going to have that, and so are your customers, right? They're going to understand because they've also shopped around. They've probably looked at different vendors. They've looked at different solutions. They've tried DIY. We want to solicit that feedback to understand what our strengths and weaknesses are, and that's also going to tap into some of our external stuff too, because people float around, right? So in these two categories, there's a lot of ways to collect that feedback. In employee categories, engagement surveys. There's a lot of teams that do yearly reviews, some do quarterly. I've seen some do ongoing. So employees always have a method to communicate, and they can chime in and be a canary and say, hey, this is not going well. And the leadership team can then digest it and respond to it proactively and not wait until Q1 2026, right? Performance reviews are great. It's 360s where managers review down, employees review up, do 360s. The more feedback and stories you're collecting, the more data you're going to have to work with to be proactive, because in an echo chamber, and we've talked about this before, echo chambers make decisions that reflect that limited stakeholder awareness. And the more intersectionality you can add, the more awareness you have, the better off we're going to be. From the customer side, we have product reviews. What are people saying online? What are people saying about the solution that we're offering? Promoter scores, satisfaction scores. We also use effort scores. Whatever that feedback is, we want to make sure that we're also collecting their stories that explain why they promote, why they're satisfied, what's making the effort so high. Whatever your KPIs are, make sure that they're associated with stories that explain the issue, because the number is not going to tell it all the time. And pulse surveys. If you have a specific interest, like, hey, we understand accessibility is a challenge. Let's do a pulse survey to understand the accessibility aspect of it, independent of price or aesthetic or availability. So we've covered objectives, we've covered where our data is coming from, but we want to make sure that we have specific questions for investigation, right? What role does our solution play in our customers' lives? What does it mean to them? We've talked previously about how people will go off on identity-based things. Gaming is a really good example, because when someone plays video games, gaming is an identity, it's a pastime, it's a community. They have a lot of stories in their data. If someone asked me to write a story about, I do love the G2 pens, they're pretty great, but there's other pens that I'm like, I used it to sign the check at the restaurant. Like, I'm not going to write a storyful essay about the pen at the restaurant, right? But if we tap into identities, we're going to get more into the solution and the role that we're solving, or the problem that we're solving and the role in that. What problems are we solving? How well do we solve them, and how do we solve them? Going back to the pen example, this allows me to write things down, but if I needed to study it, maybe I need to understand what the problem it solves is. Like, am I a writer? Am I a forgetter? Am I a post-it notes all over the houser? Spoilers, right? Like, this pen is a thing that keeps me sane. That is more of a story than like, I got this at, I don't even know, right? So when we ask these questions, we can start to figure out, well, how do we tap into the stories associated with it? What do our employees value about working here? What are these identity pieces that drive productivity or engagement? Are the employees an asset or a challenge to the productivity of the company? All right, and then how do we evolve that to be a better organization and more agile? And what are our employees' strengths and weaknesses? Those are also good to recognize, right? Because if someone wants to develop in some way that may not be what's on their resume, how do we figure out a way to adapt to them and support their growth with retention with all they know about the company? So, ways to tap into the stories fall into these 4 categories. There could be more. If you have ideas, type it in the comments below. We want people to reflect. What was their experience to date? Advise. Ptrathik is new. So excited to have you on board. What would I tell Ptrathik to be successful at Luminoso? We have meetings, we hang out, we talk about ways to help him be successful, and that's information that could be helpful in onboarding people in the future. Projecting. If I were a new employee, I wish I had known, whatever, right? Or imagine a better solution. Imagine the way things could be. That's going to help drive innovation as well. Ptrathik, anything to add on these categories as the new person in my example?
I mean, I would just again, I'd go with the first word, reflect. From an organizational perspective, it's always good to reflect on what employee expectations are. Like, for example, you've been in the system, you've been in the company for a longer period of time compared to me, and then probably things like, hey Kim, do you think your learning goals are being sort of met through Luminos, right? Because companies these days, again, reflecting on some of the things that we spoke about earlier, like trends, lifelong learning is being sort of motivated and encouraged in companies these days. Nowadays, employees don't necessarily look only for money. They look for, hey, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to learn a new skill. Can you teach me that? So I think definitely, I think this is a good way of like tapping into the stories, I'd say.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things that we want to include in each of these categories is making sure that each of the forms of getting that information has the opportunity and doesn't pre-guide people into advantages or disadvantages category. We want it to be holistic and comprehensive, and we'll touch on that more in our examples of how to do a SWOT analysis, why it's so important to have the full story and not just ask, what do you like about working here? And then cut it off. What do you dislike about working here? And then cutting it off. That's an approach. It's valid. You can get good insights from it. But the potential to do more is so great when we get more comprehensive stories. So here we have some examples of stories that we can ask to improve internal assessment. Like Ptrathik just joined. What were your expectations when you started, and what are you doing now? It's gonna be very different for him than it is for me. I joined 5 years ago. The expectations when I joined, drastically different than the expectations on me now. And it's important to understand as an employer, like, are these changes good? Are these changes bad? We need to know, because you don't know until you ask, right? And then what do you tell new folks to help them be successful? What drives people to join? And that could be for customers or for employees. And then stick to it, right? Because employment is a solution to an employee's need of, I need to pay my mortgage, right? So you can ask that for customers and for employees. And describe the ideal way of whatever. The ideal way of solving my problem as an employee. The ideal way of accomplishing this company objective as an employee, or whatever the situation is. Because sometimes describing the ideal, people have it in their heads, like the potential is there, but if you're only asking them to reflect, you're not going to get their answers for the innovation of how to improve, right? We don't want people to collect the reflective stories and then extrapolate with their own biases and human perceptions of like, oh, they said this is their problem. My solution for that is, it's better to ask, right? If someone sees the problem, they may also imagine the solution, but if they're not asked how to solve it, they may not have the appropriate venue to communicate that. And it's important to open that door for that discussion. So there's the internal story bit. The next bit that we want to touch on is how to improve external assessment. So there's a lot of things. Ptrathik touched on it earlier. So many forms of external. Internal is easy to focus on because it's like, who do you have access to immediately? So some of the examples we had here, like competitor reviews. Do you even know how many competitors you have and who they are? Some industries, it's really hard. If it's not at the grocery store with everyone labeled shelf to shelf with each other, like that's an easy way. How do we know who else is solving this problem and how they're solving it? Commissioning market researchers to field surveys. We've talked to market researchers in the past about the importance of panels and collecting feedback from a huge portfolio of people and diverse backgrounds, et cetera. That's a really good way to start getting a sense of what are my external elements. Social scrapes. What are people talking about online? How are people talking to each other? How are people advising each other to navigate similar issues? We talked about WebMD and pharmaceutical reviews. I didn't know that was a thing until a client told me. And that's a forum where people are explaining like, hey, I had this medication. This was my diagnosis experience. These were the side effects that I experienced. Take this drug or not. And it's a massive data source that I don't know if people are necessarily looking at with a level of seriousness, given it's WebMD, but people's stories are valid and they're communicating it by whatever means necessary. And there's traditional media stories. You talked about government. There's stories in journalism. There's stories being published. There's announcements being told. Being able to digest all of it, and it's an overwhelming amount, being able to digest all of it's really important. And there's a limited number of solutions that can really address it. So just like the internal assessments, externals also have questions for investigation. And we'll keep those separate from the questions that we're asking our stakeholders because people may not be direct. One of those questions that we get is, why did you quit playing the game? Because I was losing. Like it answers the question. But we go back to what were your expectations when you started and what are you doing now? That tells us the answer to our investigation because that's going to tell us why they're actually stopping playing, not just the reason they have in their type 1 brain. So questions for internal investigation are who's paying attention to our industry and what are their objectives? Are legislators watching our industry because they want to boost microchip production and they're looking to do an injection of investment through like federal aid? Good to know. Are they looking to legislate and crack down on our product's marketability to minors? Also very important to know, but very different tones around that investigation. Very similar to what trends may impact or influence people and how soon. That timeline matters a lot. You talked about ChatGPT. How much legislation is going to come around that? Schools are responding because students are going to use it for essays. It's very reactive. What is the timeline for reaction? We don't always get a ton in advance notice on how something's going to evolve. What are the values and belief of influential identities? Do we embrace ChatGPT? Do we reject it? Who's making those decisions? And what are the consequences of industry intervention? Sometimes intervention is necessary. Sometimes it's necessary in a bad time. Sometimes it's necessary in a good time. So what do we need to investigate here? And then reflect on, do the stories that we're collecting include advantages and disadvantages? So we did it. We got through the general ed. Ptrathik, how do you feel about that? Are you ready for some examples?
Definitely, I'm definitely looking forward to it, right? Because I was just thinking about a lot of things that you also mentioned, and I'm curious how it sort of transpires to the kind of examples that we're providing right now. Looking
Yes,
forward to it.
good, good. So we'll start with an easy one, which is filtering with ratings. So we talked about product reviews. It's the same workflow if you have control over the survey. So if you have a scored question and then a describe your experience or explain why, this is a very simple workflow that anyone can take. We'll start with vitamin gummies to get us started. So starting with strengths, we use Daylight to see what are the themes with 5-star reviews, what is everything being talked about, and then what's unique to those 5-star reviews. So here's a review for Smarty Pants on Amazon, digested through Daylight. And we can see everyone's talking about the packaging, the fact that it's vitamins, the taste. Like, yeah, it's a gummy vitamin. There's the gummy experience and there's the vitamin experience. But unique to this brand are the specific ingredients on there. So, all right, that's unique to our 5 stars. Let's put it on the box. Formula, emphasis on unique ingredients, resonance with our 5-star reviews. Excellent. What are our weaknesses? Where do we need to improve? So we just switch the filter for 1-star reviews and we compare what are the themes being talked about and what's unique. They're talking about the taste, horrible, disgusting, etc. A little bit of vitamin discussion, and then some like side effects of like bloating associated with the 1-star reviews. Good to know what's unique to the 1-star reviews, because sometimes our 1-star ratings are the same as everyone else's. We'll talk about that in our second example. But we can compare them, and it's helpful, and we can use that to plop in our weaknesses. Terms like gross and texture are unique to our low ratings. Good to know. So let's take a look at one of our competitors, right? Let's start with our opportunities, see what they're not doing well with. Very distinct and different from our 1-star review. So we see melted together. Like, that's a really big theme with their 1-star reviews. So we'll put it in that part of the grid. Competitor delivers struggles with product melting during delivery in the warmer seasons. All right, but that's not our problem. But maybe we boost our advertising in the summer knowing this information, right? It's an opportunity for growth there. For threats, what are they doing well? Unique to their 5-star reviews, they've got the taste down. That is coming through much stronger than our taste. Ours was on ingredients and gummy. But if they are unique to great taste, that is a language that we also want to adopt in our reviews. How do we do that? So, competitor has great flavor feedback associated with regular consumption. If you're resorting to gummy vitamins, it's probably because you don't like taking pills. And if it's good, you're more likely to take it, right? Like, I'm guilty. I don't take vitamins that aren't good. So, all right, example 2 for concept level sentiment. So depending on the data source, if we're picking from something like Reddit, we don't get to control whether or not we're taking scored metrics of something. We can do that. So for our second example, we're going to use gluten-free pasta. If you know someone who cannot have gluten, feel free to share this webinar with them. And we can give them some spoilers that they probably already know, but now you are informed on how to navigate gluten-free pasta when you cook for your friend or your spouse. So I hear it's always the spouse that's gluten-free. So we're starting with gluten-free rice pasta and white cheddar. So we're taking these different product, process, experience terms, and we put it in concept level sentiment, and the AI is surfacing. When people say gluten-free, is it in a positive or negative context? When people say noodles or cook, it's breaking down whether that was spoken about in a positive light or a negative light. And that gives us the whole top row, right? That gives us our strengths and our weaknesses in a single view. For this, the inclusion of cheese sauce is prevalent and positive among reviewers. It makes sense. Noodles have polarized feedback, as does the cooking process. Cool, we now know about mac and cheese. So let's look at a competitor. So this is not mac and cheese, but it is a gluten-free pasta made from chickpeas. Doing the same thing, we're taking the same concepts. We are sorting positive and negative matches. That gives us a level of insight. And we can look at unique to this competitor. What is unique to this brand that's not available anything else? And we can sort, are the things unique to this brand positive or negative? We have grain-free, high in protein, less carbs, protein and fiber, grain, healthy alternative, great. We can sort by matches. What is being talked about the most? What's not so common? And we can also sort by negative matches. I think that shows up after here. So just because something is really negative doesn't mean it's happening all the time. People's eyes gravitate to the concept with 12 mentions. It's unique to the brand. It's not positive, but how significant is 12? Can we put that in? We're probably not going to put any sort of reference to that in marketing, like we would with the vitamin gummies and the melting, right? So that fills out our bottom segment. They also struggle with noodle texture. It's a gluten-free pasta. It's kind of the name of the game. It's a race to figure out how to solve that problem, I think, in that market. And then threats, protein and fiber are unique and popular aspects to the competitor product. We have a bit of a start here. So, Ptrathik, anything to add on gluten-free?
Oh, definitely. I just want to appreciate the science behind the tool at this point of time. Like you said that the texture problem when it comes to gluten-free pasta, it might be, there's a 90% chance that it's a real concept in the gluten-free pasta market, right? But the fact that our engine could pick it up without necessarily being fed like structured data, that's pretty phenomenal, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of the perks of having an engine that is based on understanding the language first and then learning from the data to understand the domain versus having, a banking set, a hospitality set, a voice of the employee set. It's learning from the data so it gets to speak back to the analyst in the way that the consumers are talking about it. It takes out that need to translate what people are saying into someone else, because when we play that game of telephone, the quality of the information deteriorates with each iteration, and this allows the consumers to speak for themselves, which is so important. If you need more examples on that, if you watched the No Man's Sky webinar that we did with Rob, the gaming language, what does a galaxy mean for No Man's Sky versus daylight? They're different things. FPS, it's an acronym. When is it frames per second versus something else? Daylight's so cool and it learns from the data. I love it. So speaking of science, let's go to example 3 and do a quick plop of researchers. How does a research organization do a SWOT analysis for themselves? So we'll keep this one pretty short because we have to be conscious of time. Strengths. I have a team of senior quant-trained researchers who are excellent communicators and understand client objectives. We hear this all the time. We love that these are our users. So if this is you, talk to us. We love working with you guys. This is a really common one. Weaknesses. We'll hear that coding open-ended questions by hand and building NLP solutions internally by use case is not scalable. If you're doing gluten-free pasta one day, vitamin gummies the next, it's tough. And if you're going from like B2B tech solutions to pharmaceuticals, if your study is ranging for like cooking spray to anything else, it's hard to build that and be fast about it. And so the result of having that as a limitation is shallow use cases, reduced sample sizes, and extended timetables for deliverables. And that's not a sustainable way to run a business, especially when the core deliverable that you're offering is integrity and insights. So opportunity would be to leverage these large language models that everyone's talking about, allowing you to improve depth and scale and faster deliverable turnaround times. It's really challenging to read thousands of surveys, like hundreds of surveys, tough. Thousands of surveys, tens of thousands of, it's too much. There's solutions for it. And there's an opportunity to adopt that technology to leverage that. And then the threat for a researcher would be other research groups that are already using it. People who have developed expertise in using these AI language models and are offering the in-depth insights using those stories and objectives that we talked about early. So then what? We talked about how important it is for SWOT analyses to turn into actionable insights. So we have to make an action plan. If we've done the research, we have to connect it to the so what, right? So using the researcher example, we have amplify our strengths, retain our researchers. If they are skilled, keep them, make them happy, figure out what makes them happy, establish training opportunities. Ptrathik, you touched on it, and I don't know if we even covered this in our prep, right? It's really important to develop those training plans to keep folks and attract new talent, because when people love what they do, it's obvious. And we want to make sure that we are recruiting that top notch and we have the best pool of people to recruit from. Prioritize integrity to offset the weaknesses, right? Accept the deep use cases, expand the sample sizes, ask everybody, value everyone equally, dig into it, and standardize outputs. If we know what we're asking and it's scalable, if people are, tell me your experience and here's the scored question, we have the sample SWOT analysis. You can turn that around. It's very simple. And then leverage opportunities, adopt technology, raise the bar for what you and your clients can expect from your open-ended answers, and dig deep. Not everyone's doing it, and it's always good if you can, right? And then prepare for threats. The misapplication of technology can be really dangerous. We don't want to produce a mirage of insights, because when we walk off of false or function off of false assumptions, there's going to be significant consequences, and you don't want to be the person that gave the insight with confidence that wasn't correct. So talk to us, stay up to date with industry developments. We'd love to work with you. So as summary, we'll say stop guessing, especially with SWOT analyses, and prioritize understanding the truth. So that concludes our webinar today. Thank you, Ptrathik, for joining us. If there's any other questions, send it down in the comments, contact either of us. We're happy to talk to you, and we'll see you in the next video.